You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
Our sponsor, Collide, has some big news. If you're an Okta user, they can get your entire fleet up to 100% compliance. How? If a device isn't compliant, the user can't log into your cloud apps until they fix the problem. It's that simple. Without Collide, IT struggles to solve basic problems, like ensuring everyone's OS and browser are up to date. Unsecure devices log into your company's apps with no problems because there's nothing there to stop them. But Collide works seamlessly with Okta to enforce compliance as part of authentication and complete the Zero Trust security puzzle. Visit collide.com/CyberWire Daily to learn more or book a demo. That's KOLIDE.com/CyberWire Daily. The U.S. government discloses exploitations of MOVEit vulnerabilities, and the Department of Energy is targeted by the Clop gang. CISA releases an updated advisory for Telerik vulnerabilities affecting government servers. Shampoo malware emerges with multiple persistence mechanisms. How the IT army of Ukraine can exemplify a cyber auxiliary. Russophone gamers are being targeted with ransomware. An alleged lockbit operator has been arrested. Our guest is Will Marco from Lightcast, speaking with Simone Petrella about data-driven strategic workforce decisions. The FBI's Deputy Assistant Director for Cyber, Cynthia Kaiser, joins us with cyber criminal trends and recent successes. And a federal grand jury indicts the alleged Discord papers leaker. I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire Intel briefing for Friday, June 16, 2023. As Friday begins, so do announcements of compromise. The latest victims are United States government agencies compromised via the MOVEit file transfer vulnerability. U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Director Jen Easterly disclosed in a press briefing yesterday that several U.S. government agencies were compromised by the Clop ransomware gang via the recently disclosed MOVEit file transfer vulnerability, the Register reports. Easterly said that the agency is working closely with Progress Software and federal partners. Easterly added, "We are not aware of Clop actors threatening to extort or release any data stolen from government agencies. Although we are very concerned about this, we're working on it with urgency. This is not a campaign like SolarWinds that presents a systemic risk to our national security or our nation's network." She noted that the threat actors are only stealing information that is specifically stored on your file transfer application at the precise time that the intrusion occurred. The U.S. Department of Energy is among the compromised agencies impacted by the MOVEit vulnerability. A department spokesperson told the Register that the department took steps for prevention of further exposure and notified CISA. Federal News Network says the two compromised DOE entities are Oak Ridge Associated Universities and the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant in New Mexico. CISA, with support from the FBI and the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, the MSISAC, released an updated cybersecurity advisory regarding the Telerik vulnerability. The original CSA reported indicators of compromise in a federal civilian executive branch agency. Multiple threat actors and at least one APT were able to exploit a vulnerability in the Progress Telerik user interface. The updated report shares that forensic analysis at another FCEB agency identified more indicators of compromise by an unattributed APT, which exploited the Telerik RAD controls cryptographic weakness, which was rated as a critical on the CVSS scale. The vulnerability, as described by Telerik, can lead to cross-site scripting attacks, leak of machine key, compromise of the ASP.NET view state, and arbitrary file uploads and downloads. The agencies recommend patching all software, prioritizing fixes to the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. Researchers say the newly detected persistent malware being called Shampoo may take multiple showers to rinse from your system. HP's Wolf Security reports a newly detected malicious ChromeLoader-like malware campaign they're calling Shampoo. The researchers describe ChromeLoader as a family of Google Chrome browser extension malware first analyzed in early 2022 by security researchers, with the goal of installation of a malicious extension in Google Chrome used for advertising. The infection chain starts when a user downloads an ISO file from a malicious website. That, in turn, initiates the download of a VB script, which eventually downloads the malicious browser extension. After installation, the malware monitors the victim's searches and injects advertisements in their browser. The Shampoo malware is very difficult for a user to get rid of, as it's said to have multiple persistence mechanisms. One such mechanism is a built-in installation script that repeats every 35 to 75 minutes. Shampoo differs from a standard ChromeLoader by adding some additional counter-security features like encryption of locally stored files, and by its use of VB script instead of an ISO file for initial infection. Dutch media have attributed last week's distributed denial-of-service attacks against the websites of the Rotterdam and Groningen seaports to Russian hacktivists, specifically to no-name 05716. The IT Army of Ukraine, an acknowledged hacktivist auxiliary working against Russian targets in loose concert with Ukraine's government, offers an unusually transparent example of offensive cyber operations, hacktivism, and the mobilization of a cyber auxiliary. Lawfare summarizes some of the key features of the group's performance during Russia's war. It's demonstrated the ability to conduct sabotage, denial of service, doxing, and defacement. It crowdsources its operations over Telegram, and its targeting has been opportunistic but selective. The transparency of the IT Army's operations and relations with the Ukrainian government is relative. Kyiv has maintained that the IT Army coordinates only with civilian government agencies, not military or intelligence services, but it's clear that some coordination occurs with military and intelligence organizations. Some of that cooperation is done for deconfliction, some to receive direction, and in a few cases, for direct combat support. The IT Army of Ukraine also uses its Telegram channel to post news and opinions selected to influence its followers' views of the war. Russia has also mobilized social media to push its own narratives, most recently the narrative that Ukraine's counteroffensive has failed. That particular view seems not only false, as well as being, in any case, grossly premature, but it also appears to have gained little traction, according to the Atlantic Council's DFR lab monitoring. Some of the posts that failed to gain significant virality are associated with Mr. Kim.com, to use his screen name. Mr. .com's motivation in serving the Russian agents as a useful idiot is unclear. Cyble Research and Intelligence Labs this week reported a ransomware campaign against Russian-speaking gamers playing the first-person shooter multiplayer game Enlisted. The attackers, who remain unknown for the time being, use a ransomware they're calling WannaCry 3.0. It is, however, unrelated to the genuine WannaCry released in 2017. We close with two bits of news from the courts. In the first, Cyberscoop reports that a 20-year-old Russian national has been arrested on charges of involvement with the Lockbit ransomware gang. Ruslan Magomedovich Astamirov was taken into custody on Wednesday in Arizona, according to a criminal complaint. The charges identify the Chechnya native, Mr. Astamirov, as perpetrating at least 5 attacks against United States, Asia, Europe, and Africa-based victims between August 2020 and March 2023, the record reports. His charges include conspiracy to transmit ransom demands, commit wire fraud, and intentionally damage protected computers. Bleeping Computer highlights the fact that this is the third affiliate of Lockbit charged by the U.S. Department of Justice within the last 7 months. And in the second bit of courthouse news, Massachusetts Air National Guardsman Jack Teixeira has been indicted on felony charges involving leaks of classified military documents on Discord. The AP reports that Mr. Teixeira faces 6 counts of willful retention and transmission of national defense information. The investigation into the leak began in April after classified U.S. intelligence was seen circulating in social media. The former airman's position in the Guard gave him a top-secret clearance, which allowed him to access sensitive information. Newsweek writes that he was subsequently identified by investigators and accused of sharing hundreds of pages of sensitive information on a Discord server. A conviction could mean 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine for each count of willful transmission of classified information. The Guardian quotes U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland in the case, who said that Teixeira is charged with sharing information with users on a social media platform he knew were not entitled to receive it. In doing so, he is alleged to have violated U.S. law and endangered our national security. Coming up after the break, the FBI's Deputy Assistant Director for Cyber, Cynthia Kaiser, joins us with cyber criminal trends and recent successes. Our guest is Will Marco from Lightcast, speaking with Simone Petrella about data-driven strategic workforce decisions. Stay with us. And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show.
Arm your team with the latest news and trends in the evolving cybersecurity landscape with CyberWire Pro Enterprise. Our unlimited pro content will allow you and your team to accelerate and sustain cybersecurity awareness and knowledge. Get access to searchable and accessible news in cybersecurity, business, policy, privacy, disinformation, and more. Find out about our education and military discounts by inquiring at thecyberwire.com/pro.
There's a strange mix of forces at play in the cybersecurity workforce. Many companies are hiring, some companies are experiencing layoffs, and yet overall there's still a sense that there are many open positions out there waiting to be filled. Which is all to say it's more important than ever for managers to take an evidence-based approach to hiring and retention. Will Marco is VP of Applied Research and Talent at Lightcast. My N2K colleague Simone Petrella spoke with him about using data to make strategic workforce decisions.
So, we've talked about this in the past and certainly have very similar viewpoints on how organizations and companies can take a more strategic perspective on how to think about the cybersecurity workforce shortage, how to actually identify and make good decisions based on what they need to do. What are some of the common misperceptions that you view your clients, people that you work with, having about this particular topic?
Great question. And I think there are a few misperceptions that are pretty common in the market. First, misperception is that it is just a skills gap. And I think there definitely is a skills gap in cybersecurity, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But I think that there's also an expectations gap, that a lot of employers don't realize that they are contributing to some of the hiring challenges that they have by asking for certain credentials or certifications or skill sets that may or may not be important in the roles that they're asking them for. So give you a concrete example, which we see more often than you would think, is that take a CISSP. This is a certification, which is a great certification, and it has its place, and it's important for people who are more advanced in their careers to consider getting a CISSP. But we see a lot of employers asking for a CISSP, which requires minimum of 5 years of prior work experience to qualify for a full CISSP, asking for this credential along with no more than 2 years of prior work experience, which it's impossible to have the two. And the hiring managers, it's not their fault. They know what a CISSP is. They know you have to have 5 years of work experience, but there's something in the internal process and the communication between the hiring manager and the HR team building that job requisition that results in a disconnect. And so I think that one big misperception is that either it's just a skills gap or it's just an expectations gap, or hiring managers don't know what they're asking for. The reality is hiring managers know what they're asking for. The reality is there are people out there who could fill some of these jobs, but there is a breakdown in communication in that process of building those job requisitions. So that creates that expectations gap. That said, I also hear a lot of people saying, oh, wait, there is no skills gap. What are we talking about? That's also not true. There also is a deficit of workers. When we look across the cybersecurity workforce, we see that we only have about 2/3 of the workers we need to fill all of the jobs that employers are demanding. So that effectively means we're stepping onto the cyber battlefield missing 1/3 of our army. So there's also a talent shortage. There's also a skills gap. And I think anybody who says it's just one or the other is contributing to some of the misperceptions in the market and is contributing to some of the information gaps that are exacerbating some of the talent gaps and the expectation gaps in the field.
Yeah, I can totally see where that comes into play. I know we've seen that ourselves in the expectation gap. What is your recommendation? How do you propose that we kind of solve that expectation gap, since job recs are one of those interesting areas where it's in the domain of HR, but the hiring managers do it. How do we improve that process?
So the first thing that you need to do, which I think you started to touch upon, is you need to break down silos. If you're in the cybersecurity world, if you're a CISO or a cybersecurity manager, you need to view HR as your friend and partner, not your rival, which I think is the culture in a lot of organizations. HR is also trying to work with cybersecurity managers to get the best job requisitions out there. And you need to figure out how can you work together in a more collaborative fashion. And I tell this to HR folks all the time as well, is that one of the first things you need to think about when building a job requisition is how is this supporting the stakeholders that it most needs to support, and how is it driving business value within your company? So the first thing you need to do, be collaborative. Second thing you need to do is you really need to define what is it that this person in this role needs to do, not just at a job title level, but at the underlying skill level. A lot of people call this skills-based hiring, which is a very amorphous term, and it means a little bit of one thing to one person, something different to someone else. So sometimes I stay away from that nomenclature, but it really is a manifestation of skills-based hiring, is understanding and inventorying what are the skills associated with each role within your team so that you can build your job requisition around those skills that people need, not just the credentials or degree requirements that people have used as imperfect proxies for those skills. And once you do that, you can then start to figure out, okay, which skills are going to be most critical to include in the job requisition when we're going out and hiring for people versus when we're training those people internally, and which of those skills are need to haves versus nice to haves when somebody's walking through the door. I'll give you a concrete example of this in practice. There's a financial services company we worked with that was trying to right-size some of its job descriptions around the skills not the credentials, not the certifications that were most important for proficiency in that role. And they were able to identify a few things that they could just take out, like a bachelor's degree requirement or a certification requirement or some emerging skills that were really nice to haves and not need to haves. And by just making a few simple tweaks to their job descriptions, they were able to reduce the average hiring cost by over $10,000 per hire, and they were able to expand their candidate pool by over 60%. So sometimes just making those slight tweaks to the skills you're asking for and the credentials you're asking for can have huge benefits to companies when they go out and hire for cybersecurity workers.
That's Will Markow from Lightcast speaking with N2K President Simone Petrella. You can hear an extended version of this conversation on our website. I am pleased to welcome back to the show Cynthia Kaiser. She is Deputy Assistant Director for Cyber at the FBI. Director Kaiser, it's great to have you back. I want to touch today on some of the cyber criminal trends that you and your colleagues there at the FBI are tracking. And you all have had some successes recently as well. What can you share with us today?
Great. And once again, thanks for having me. Now, I think most people are tracking how pervasive the cyber criminal threat is. And I think really the state of cybercrime is this interconnected, state-protected, and callous about the impacts of their actions as long as they continue to make enough money along the way. And they represent really a loose international network of actors who seek to exploit vulnerabilities, and they're wickedly opportunistic. They once targeted individuals and small businesses, but in recent years, they've pivoted to these high-value targets, including critical infrastructure, especially targets that can't afford downtime, that need to be able to have their operations. So, they're targeting hospitals and schools. I mean, this is just the lowest of low. So when we're looking at this landscape and looking at, how are we going to really tackle this to have an impact? We don't want to play whack-a-mole. We want to make sure that we're having this broad impact that tightens the net around cybercriminal actors. And part of that has been looking at the key services that they're using. So we know across the cybercriminal ecosystem, there are main groups, entities, services. It's just like an economy. It's a marketplace. And they need places that help them cash out money or exchange money or buy tools. And there's not a huge amount of those. We have a lot of different cybercriminals going to the same places. So what our strategy's been is to look at those places that are facilitators of cybercrime so that we can have a broader impact.
So really focusing on some of those bottlenecks there. Can you give us some examples where you and your colleagues have had some success?
Great, yeah. So recently, we've been able to, with international partners as well, and our U.S. government partners, take down a number of key services. That includes Chip Mixer, which was a major mixing service for cryptocurrency, and that was used by multiple different sets of actors, not just multiple ransomware actors, and multiple nation-state actors as well. We've had targets against the back end of major ransomware variants, and I call that a key service because in the ransomware ecosystem, it's an affiliate model. So people are going and, they're an affiliate and they're going to say they deploy 4 different types of ransomware. So they go find the developers, they take that developer, and everyone shares the profit. If we can ensure that kind of back end is either monitored, we provide decryption keys, or then we just take it down, that provides us an ability to hamper those cyber criminal operations.
I'm curious, as you all are monitoring, the communications of these actors on those online, dark web forums that we hear about. Do you see your efforts being described there? Is it a factor of discouragement, or are they talking about the types of things that you all are up there, or that you all are up to try to thwart them?
I hope so. That's kind of the point.
Fair enough.
I mean, we want cybercriminals to know that we're over their shoulder. We're watching what they're doing, and we're waiting for the opportune time to be able to take down their operations, to hamper them, to ensure that we're keeping America safe.
And how about partnering with industry here? What part do they have to play in keeping those lines of communication open?
Such a huge part. So I think there's so many different levels of industry that we partner with. So there's the targeted entities or victims, so the businesses that are being targeted by cybercriminals, partnering with them and ensuring that we're able to share information. So if they're targeted, they don't get compromised, or help provide them not only remediation, advice, or just peace of mind after an incident, but justice, like justice for the crimes that are perpetuated against them. So that partnership is so critical and so key. But there's also other layers of industry where with the, say, cybersecurity firms or even the outside counsels that companies may be working with so that they can ensure that they're doing everything that they need to do from their own end, to managed service providers. There's so many different levels of industry that are important for us to partner with in terms of being able to help. Because in the end, like for over 100 years, we've been a victim-centered organization. And so our partnership, either at the operational partnership level, so how do we work with industry to help mitigate this, to the we're actually supporting, we're supporting these victims, or we're stopping people from becoming victims. That's just the most important thing to FBI.
You mentioned international partners as well. Can we touch on that? I mean, to what degree does the FBI take a role of global leadership here?
The FBI is a global leader in cybercrime investigations and imposing risks and consequences on those cyber actors, and we take that role really seriously. We have over 16 cyber assistant legal attaches who are deployed across the world in embassies across the world. And those assistant legal attaches do a few things. One is capacity build, and that's not necessarily like, general cybersecurity advice. That's how do you run a cyber criminal investigation? And then they also facilitate those operations. So we don't care if we arrest them in the U.S. or bring them back to the U.S. We care that these cyber criminals are offline. So if it is more advantageous or easier to be able to ensure that another country's able to provide these consequences, we're there. We're there to be those partners. And then finally, we've also, in a few instances, been able to deploy to our international partners. And I think Albania's a great example of that, where when the Albanian government was attacked by Iranian cyber actors, the FBI was there within days to help them. Within, I think, a little over a week, we were sent an entire cyber action team, the same kind of team, technical team we might send to assist a U.S. victim, because they're an ally, and they asked and we answered. And we know that cyber threats have no borders, so we can't keep it contained to the U.S. The help we give our allies helps American citizens as well.
Cynthia Kaiser is Deputy Assistant Director for Cyber at the FBI. Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible. Find out more about sponsoring our programs at thecyberwire.com/sponsor. And that's the CyberWire for Friday, June 16th. We'd like to remind you all that this coming Monday is the U.S. federal holiday of Juneteenth, and we won't run our daily podcast then. We'll be back as usual on Tuesday. In the meantime, enjoy Juneteenth. Be sure to check out this weekend's Research Saturday and my conversation with Johannes Ulrich from the SANS Technology Institute. We're discussing machine learning risks, attacks against Apache NiFi. That's Research Saturday. Check it out. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. You can email us at cyberwire@n2k.com. Your feedback helps us ensure we're delivering the information and insights that help keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like the CyberWire are part of the daily intelligence routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, as well as the critical security teams supporting the Fortune 500 and many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show was written by Rachel Gelfand. Our executive editor is Peter Cl0p, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week. Never miss a thing with CyberWire Pro. Stay cyber aware by getting access to all our public podcasts, ad-free, as well as our exclusive CyberWire Pro podcasts, briefing, articles, and events by becoming a CyberWire Pro subscriber. Get actionable reporting, analysis, and insights on global events occurring in the cybersecurity industry at your fingertips. Visit thecyberwire.com/pro to subscribe today. Hello, listeners. We're always looking for ways to improve the CyberWire network to give you an intelligence-driven news experience that saves you time and keeps you in the know on the latest developments in cybersecurity. We'd like to hear your feedback in our 2023 audience survey. Complete this survey for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Visit thecyberwire.com/survey. That's thecyberwire.com/survey and share your feedback. Thanks.